All right. So, one of the things that I came across in my research for this episode was the topic of hip hop. And I want to cue this up for a second because I worked in a jail for youth for a long time. I actually learned how to produce a little bit, punching the keyboard for some pretty talented hip hop artists and people who also discovered the medium while they were on the inside. And I personally felt that they learned a lot from that. I also thought that it was an underrated thing that people can learn from. And when I was researching your work, one of the things that caught my eye, of course, was the topic of hip hop. And I'm curious if you learned some life lessons or business lessons from that world that you could share with us today.
Yeah, I always like there was this old idea and old saying oftentimes where people would say like hip hop raised me. And I believe in many ways like a lot of the core lessons that I've applied to my life came from hip hop. Like I can look back at some of my early days and like grinding and trying to push through struggle and being able to listen to some of the like great tracks from Jay-Z, from Eminem, and folks just who went through a little bit of the mud, so to speak, and how they were able to overcome it. And I found that to be ridiculously valuable for like a lot of my own work and a lot of my career. Just being able to kind of put in the headphones and hear someone talk about like the struggles of poverty, of being broke, of like trying to make it in this world was a very valuable thing for me. One of the other things that I found to be insightful in a lot of specifically Jay-Z's tracks was like the importance of like quality. And from hip hop, I was able to kind of emphasize and learn about the importance of taking a lot of care into your craft and worrying deeply about the craft as a creator. So for me as a marketer, a lot of my work wasn't like writing lyrics and writing the words to a song, but writing a blog post or creating a carousel or creating a video and educating people. And with that, I was able to kind of go into this state by listening to a lot of hip hop songs that really think like, all right, I need to ensure that the quality is there. There was a lot of Biggie songs that talked about like, you got to treat your first like your last and your last like your first. And I was like, all right, cool. Always stay hungry, always stay humble. You have to like always be willing to treat every project that you get like it's your first one, because those first projects that you get, you go into them and you're so hungry. You're always like, trying to give 120%. You're willing to go that extra mile to make this something special. And when you have that mentality across every project that you touch, everything that you do, I find that you just get a better outcome with all the work that you do. So that was another key piece of it. One other element, which is more on the like give back side, the social side, I can remember listening to a lot of Lupe Fiasco. And with Lupe Fiasco, he always talked about throw two in the air for the kid who's in like Brooklyn and Lagos and all these different areas. And like I resonated with the fact that at one point I was that young kid. I was that kid who was like lost and trying to figure out like where he goes, what he does, what should I be. Oftentimes, like the idea instilled in your brain at a young age, at least in my world, was you can either go be a baller or you can essentially live the life on the streets. And I was like, all right, I ain't good at ball, and that one my grandmother's not letting me do, so I got to figure something else out. And through a lot of Lupe Fiasco's songs, I was able to kind of realize, okay, there's this other world out there. And then I came across Childish Gambino, some of his tracks in the early days, and some of the stuff around like it's okay to just like lean into whoever you are, just lean into your style, your own swag, your own aesthetic, whatever it is that is quirky about you, and just embrace it. And then from all that, kind of like I set myself on this path to entrepreneurship and business. And through my entire life, I've relied on a lot of the lessons that I learned from hip hop through my career. Even today, Foundation, my company, we have this ongoing saying where it's like, stand up, be humble. And it's a shout out and a throwback to Kendrick Lamar and some of his content, where it's this idea that like, you have to stay humble. You have to stay humble even amidst the wins. Yes, you're getting wins, but stay humble amidst it all, because there's always somebody who's doing better than you. So yes, celebrate for a bit, stand up, take pride in it, but let's go get it. Let's go continue to secure the bag and get more wins on the board. So for me, I love hip hop. I love it's literally the only thing that I really listen to. And yeah, it's gotten me through a lot of my challenges, the opportunities, and I think it's given me a good mentality and perspective leaning into business at large.
And me too. I posted the other day a thing about how I have a fear of death, and I was sharing that
Mm,
part of the reason why I create content when I'm working on my book or when I create a podcast episode, I'm thinking like, if heaven forbid I'm gone, my daughters can listen to this someday. And I heard Eminem's one of his new tracks called Temporary. And it was basically about the fact that when I'm gone, Haley, you're going to get to listen to me in songs, but I want you to hear this one because if I put it all into one song, it would be like this. And I jotted down that I need to write a thread or a post about the fact that Eminem's been saving my life, I feel like, for like 30 years, because I was that teenager at, 15 years old too, like struggling a little bit with depression, like walking home late at night from the grocery store that I was working at and being like, what am I doing with my life? And putting on some of his music that would be the messages I think would be hidden because my parents or different people would be like, oh, you're not allowed to listen to that because
right.
of the pop culture aspect of the headlines that like CNN's going to post about it. um, what do you think that people get wrong about the medium of hip hop?
Yeah. I think a lot of folks think it's like toxic music. And don't get me wrong, some of it is. Like, I'm not gonna lie and say like all hip hop music is good. Um, all rap is good. Like, no question, there's some of it that is toxic. But I think to paint the entire genre with one brush is a complete falsehood that kind of is a narrative that has been around for quite some time, since like probably the late 80s. And I think the reality is there's a lot of good hip hop music. There's a lot of good rap music that is about things that actually are like a net positive for the world. And if the world heard those lyrics and embraced that music, I think the world in general would probably be better. We'd have more efficiencies, more productivity. I think we'd have less stress. I think people would kind of chill a bit more and be able to kind of really pursue their ambitions and goals. And I think for me, when I think of all the genres, I don't know, and I might be wrong here, and I'd love for folks to find me on social media and tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's another genre of music that focuses so much on like success, right? Like there's not another genre that talks about the pursuit of success to the same level that I think hip hop does. Like you can listen to almost any Nipsey Hussle track and you're going to hear elements talking about success. You can listen to early Big Sean and he's talking about striving for success. And that shows up in so many ways, in so many songs. And I think for me, that's why I resonate so much with it, is because of that like desire and ambition to get things that you've never had and to experience life in a way that you've never had and to fulfill your own goals and objectives of like, I want to be the first person in my family to go to university. I want to be the first person in my family to get a diploma, to start a business, to open up an HVAC company, whatever it might be that is of interest to you, to be tuned in to music that is constantly telling you to be better, to try, to push through, to overcome a challenge, to like, if you're feeling a little bit of a certain way, then here's another way to look at it and like have perspective. Especially Nas's stuff. Like Nas has some great albums where it's valuable for folks to kind of just get a better sense of like reality from like how good we might have it versus other folks who are like truly in the thick of it in like third world countries and stuff like that. So for me, I love the fact that it's a great reminder to give you a perspective of how other people have it. And then also, I think that the message around the pursuit of excellence is something that is oftentimes overlooked. Everybody always goes to the negative side of hip hop where, yes, there's some tracks that are about drugs and stuff like that and like the all the bad things that every stereotype says. All of those things are there. But I think we underestimate the amount of high quality content that can literally just, you plug in your headphones and you're like, all right, I'm going to wire in, I'm going to get work done and I'm going to crush it. And if you can find those playlists and just like listen to them, I think they can change your psyche for the net positive.
Yeah, this brings me back to episode 2 of this podcast, and I interviewed a David Speed UK, who's a spray paint artist, and he's also a hip hop head. Like he's obsessed with hip hop. And when I asked him advice for podcasting, one of the things he said was, don't focus too much on your personal interests. For example, I could talk about hip hop for an hour every episode with every single guest, but I want to think about what my target audience really needs in that moment. And I remember saying to him, well, the funny thing is, I think we could learn transferable skills for an hour every episode just based around that topic. And as we continue down this thread a little bit, I can't help but think of one that we didn't talk about yet, and that's 50 with the 50th law of power and how that connected to Robert Greene's work with the 48 laws of power. I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and if you haven't read 50th Law, I strongly recommend it. It's a great book. It breaks down like a lot of great strategies around marketing, around going to market, around thinking about your customer and like trying to serve them well. One of the other things that I learned from that book was like the strategic approach to beef. So like I believe it was the early 2000s. There was a lot of buzz around Ja Rule versus 50 Cent. And as a young guy, like I was deep into listening to like Murder Inc., which was Ja Rule's label. And then 50 comes on scene and Ja Rule's no longer cool. And I was like, oh snap, like who's this guy? And they were just like beefing. And in business, a lot of times organizations play it safe. They don't beef. But I think there's actually a lot of lessons that even a small startup or somebody who's going into business should be thinking about as it relates to their communication to the market in general around beef. Now, when I say beef, I'm not talking about like having beef with somebody on the corner or something like that. I'm talking about having beef with a problem that exists in the world against something that your customers have a problem with. So let's say, for example, I am working to launch a new coffee company, or I'm trying to bring to market a website design company, and I'm just a young person. I just learned how to code. I just learned how to use Wix or something like that, and I want to design websites. Instead of going to the market and just saying that, you should be going to the market and saying, hey, unlike every other local agency in this city that is going to charge you $50K for a website, I'll spin you up a website for $5,000 because they're ripping you off. And the reason why they're ripping you off is because they don't understand AI. They don't understand design. They don't understand a few simple things that I do know. And they have an office and they have to cover that. But I'm going to get it for you much faster and much more efficiently. So you're now creating beef between you and the other agencies. In the market's going to look at that positioning and they're going to be like, wow, look at this person who's going to market with this offer. They're scrappy, they're hungry, kind of like 50 was early days, and they're going up against the big bad local agencies. Same thing in a coffee shop. If you rolled out a coffee shop and you're like, Starbucks is charging you $10 for a coffee that takes 80 cents to make, I'm going to charge you $3, right? Like you go to market, you find that big bad wolf that you want to go up against, you throw the beef out there and you talk about it regularly. And it's a great way to position yourself in the market. So long story, a little bit longer. I love that book. I think it's a great one. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like there's a lot of lessons that people can apply from hip hop. And while it might not be something that you want to talk about every episode, you probably could have a full show on all of the different lessons you could take from it.
100%. We'll see how long we go right now because like this is just too good and too valuable of stuff to quit on it. But haven't read the 50th Law yet. I got it sitting literally on my bookshelf.
Oh, you got to read it. It's so good.
Right on top of 48 Laws of Power. And that was one that kind of escaped me for a long time too. 48 Laws, like I've always, like kind of consumed Robert Greene's content a little bit, like online writing and things like that, certainly videos and podcasts. And it'd been like, why didn't I ever read that? If it worked for 50, I'm sure it could work for me. So the thing is, I figured I should go through 1 through 48 before doing 50. So that's the only reason. It's right around the corner. But what I do have that I think brings us up a little bit are a couple connections. And one is when Clubhouse was a big thing, I hopped on there fairly early and was hosting rooms and stuff. And I found myself in a conversation with The Game.
Cool.
That's another hip hop artist we didn't talk about yet, but he talked a little bit about the fact that a lot of youth will see hip hop and they look at the situations like the beef that's in the media and all this. And I had the opportunity at VCon to hear Snoop Dogg say a very, very similar thing. They both said that they still create music and write lyrics around the topics that they grew up in, that their trials and tribulations they faced, because that's how they connect. It's almost like detailing their trauma a little bit and writing about it, and it sells. So the things around the murder and like shootings and having beef with people. But he said, we're not doing that. if we did that, we'd be in jail. We're busy building businesses. And that's the part that's hard to get across as a message. And I remember hearing him say that and being like, this is the first time I think I've heard it articulated. I don't know that he would go on the news and say it like that, but because we were in a clubhouse room, maybe he was willing to open up a little bit about it. And I would try and share that with youth that I worked with, because some of them were serving murder charges or attempted homicide charges and things. And in one case, one of them was really skilled, really talented. And for the most part, he had escaped being murdered. He was part of a shooting, a triple homicide, and he was their survivor, but, caught some charges because of it as well. But he would still sing about all that stuff. And I remember asking him, is this you?
Right.
Or is this a character yet? And he sat there for felt like a minute,
Right.
but probably a good 20 seconds. And he just looks at me and he says, I don't know yet. And we had a conversation for about 6 months about the fact that if you do make it out, if you succeed in this medium, it's going to be because you learn to pivot that into a character. And we started talking about personal branding and things like that. Now, I know you are really skilled when it comes to personal branding. When people think about that topic, they probably don't even know what the hell we're talking about. So what are some thoughts that gives you on that topic?
Yeah, so I think you nailed it. So the idea of personal branding is an intentional shift in your mindset. And I had this shift when I was probably like 21 years old, and it changed everything for me. So what you want to go down the path of is thinking about yourself as like a business. And instead of always just floating through life and just experiencing it, you take a moment and you reflect and you look at yourself and you say, okay, what do people think of me today? And you start with your immediate circle. And from that, you're going to start to say, okay, they might think I'm good at ball. They might think that I'm a bit of a hothead. They might think that I'm social. They might think I'm quirky. I'm funny. They might think I'm smart. All of these things are going to come to your mind, right? And I want you to picture that. So that's the perception of the people you know today. Now, even if you're an artist, if you are a writer, if you're trying to create a business, whatever you might be doing, you still do that same exercise. And that's you today. Then you want to accelerate 10 years and say, okay, 10 years from now, what do I want those things to be said about me? You might say, I want to be known as the successful person. I want to be known as the person who broke out of the hood. I want to be someone who is entrepreneurial. I want to be known as somebody who is innovative, who has a great design, whatever it is. You're going to map those things out. And then you have to look at the gaps between what you're called today and what you want to be called tomorrow. And then you have to start to think about, how do you shift that narrative to a point where in the future, people actually refer to you though as those things. Well, if you don't want to be called a hothead anymore, then you have to take a second and be like, all right, I got to stop doing hothead things. I have to reduce that to change the narrative and the story that's happening around me. That's a first part of your personal brand that needs to change. You want to be seen as entrepreneurial. Do you run a business? No? Okay, so you're not entrepreneurial yet. What can you do to start something? Can you start a business? Can you start something? Can you show that you have a side hustle? Can you show that you're willing to flip things on eBay and educate people on that? Are you going to start an Instagram account where you're talking about your own journey to be seen as entrepreneurial? You start to figure all that out. And then when you start to lay the bricks around, this is the steps that I need to take to get to this desired outcome, you start to actually influence your personal brand. Now, a lot of people online make the mistake of saying you can create a personal brand by just setting up a Twitter account and scheduling some posts and calling it a day. You can get traction on that, but what you need to actually do is ensure that you're doing things in the real world that then translate to the digital world. So if you want to be entrepreneurial, remember I said the first thing you need to do is start something, right? So you start a business of some sort. It could be an Instagram account, it could be a stream, it could be whatever you want. I don't care what the business is. If you want to be entrepreneurial, show that you created something, and then talk about online the lessons that you're learning while you do that. And by doing that, you're now starting to shift the narrative even further around that entrepreneurial element of you. So if I'm running a business and I start to talk about it, people are going to start saying, oh, Ross is a business person. And then eventually they're going to say he's entrepreneurial. If I want to be known for beautiful graphics and designs, I'm going to reach out to probably 20 different companies and be like, hey, can I redesign your logo? I'll do it for free just the first time because I'm starting up my business. Let me know what you think. reach out to them. I start to design them, and then I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I'm sharing the work that I'm doing, and I'm talking about on Instagram, maybe on TikTok, the process that I took to create these things. And then eventually people are going to start to say, I'm a designer, right? So personal branding is doing things and then telling people about the things that you do that align with the narrative and story that you want to be associated with yourself. And early on, I said that there's a significant moment that has to happen. And that moment is when you start to view yourself as a company and you say, I am the CEO of me. As the CEO of me, I need to now become the marketing director for myself. What does that mean? It means I need to understand how to market this person that I am. How do I market Ross? Well, I need to have my Facebook, my LinkedIn, my Instagram all look a certain way. When someone goes to Google, I want them to not necessarily see what other people have written about me, what the media might have written about me, what my high school might have written about me. I want them to see the story that I control. So I'm going to set up a website and I'm going to create content about myself. And I'm going to talk about things that are of interest to me so people go to a place to hear my story. Now, that's just in my marketing seat. You also need to be your own finance director. So you need to look at your funds. You need to open up your bank account and ask yourself, how much money do I have in? How much money do I have going out? And be intentional on a regular basis of monitoring that. You also have to be your own HR department. And this is, in my opinion, one of the most important, but one of the most underrated parts of this CEO of me concepts. What does it mean? It means I'm going to take a look at the people who are not employed by me, but they're around me, right? Like at this early stage when it's just you don't have people on your team, but you have to look at like the people who you're around and you're looking at and saying, okay, this is my best friend. This person is bringing good energy. This person is not dragging me down. This person is in my corner. This person is good for my mental health. You're doing that across relationship after relationship after relationship. And I know that it is not going to be easy, but sometimes a relationship doesn't serve you. You need to let it go. The same way that in a company you would fire someone, you might have to fire people from your relationship. Now, when I say fire people, I don't mean anything violent. I'm just saying you start ghosting them. You might have to have a conversation, but you're not going to hang out with them as much as you used to. You're going to reduce that time because you recognize that person's not serving you, your goals, your ambitions, and where you want to go. So when you start to view your life in that way, you just start to be more efficient, more productive, more solution oriented, and you get closer to your dreams and you get closer to getting that personal brand because you've done the things that you actually want to, and you've gotten rid of a lot of dead weight that was holding you back.
That was such a real good summary in a short bit that could change people's lives for sure. When I hear the word personal brand, I get it, but I can also remember a time when I didn't. And I feel like it gets lumped in there with another term, influencer. A lot of
Right.
like so many people hate that one. Personal branding's not as bad, but there's still this belief like I don't want to have a personal brand. It's got like some sort of icky feeling to it or
Yeah.
something. When people struggle with that mindset around it in the first place, how would you help them?
Yeah. I think you have to start by recognizing like there's billions of people in the world. People are going to have an opinion, and most of those opinions don't matter. They don't actually matter. They have zero impact on your life. They don't need to, you don't need to care so much about other people's opinions. And no matter if people think the word influencer is icky or not, whether or not people think personal branding is icky or not, the truth is we're all eventually going to go through this life and we're going to die. And if you can get through this life doing the things that you want to do, if you can achieve your goals, if you can be able to escape a circumstance you don't want to be in, who cares what everybody else thinks of these terms? If you're able to secure the bag, escape a horrible situation, put food on the table for your family, for your kids, for your own life, to be able to travel, to do things that you never thought was possible, forget the haters. Go and do your thing. There's a great book that I recommend a lot of people read. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked. And I think that when you can have that courage to be disliked and to pursue your own ambitions with 100% pure intention, you get a level of clarity in your life that is unparalleled to anything else. So for me, I don't care what people think about the word influencer, personal branding, or any of that. All that I would encourage you to do is to do the self reflection to think to yourself, what do I want to do with my life? Can I get there by being active on social media, being an influencer, doing this stuff? And if the answer is yes, then pursue it relentlessly and forget all of the haters. You might get a few people who send you a DM in the family group chat saying, "LOL, did you guys see so and so's new video? What are they doing?" Ignore it, mute the chat, and then come back to it 6 months later when you're out and able to show, like, look, I got traction. I've got a couple thousand followers now, and somebody's paying me for my services. Be like, hey, this actually worked out, right? It's easy to have people poke fun and let that be your momentum stopper. Don't let it. Don't let that stop your momentum. Push through it, keep going. And when you fast forward, those people will probably reach out to you and be like, hey, are you hiring? And that's the end goal. Like, that's where you could eventually get to. So just push through it. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
It's so good that we opened that loop early on about hip hop, because I feel like it's just going to keep coming back up, because as we talk about this right now, it makes me think of the idea of an alter ego. And I was just watching the Netflix documentary last night, Receiver, on the NFL receivers, and Justin Jefferson was talking about when he puts all his jewelry and the sunglasses on, he becomes Jets, because he's too humble of a person to brag and dance and showboat and celebrate, and he doesn't feel confident. So he has to become Jets. And I remember hearing an interview recently with Eminem, who we referenced earlier, about the invention of Slim Shady, who he's now trying to kill off, because he said in order to be that crazy, he had to write with a complete different mindset, almost like the Joker. And it makes me think of the idea of creating an alter ego, whether it's implicit or explicit. The other thing it makes me think of is the topic of handles, because I used to use the handle Just Tries. And the reason I did that was because this was all so new to me, and I knew that I'd be a bit embarrassed doing it. And I didn't even know what I wanted to do. Did I want to start a YouTube channel? Did I want a podcast? Did I want to be an online writer? Did I want to build a software as a service? Did I want to start affiliate marketing? Like, I just had no clue. So I had to jump around and try shit and figure it out. So I wanted to not have to like explain that too many times. So I literally just made it my handle. I was like, this is my handle. I don't know what the hell I'm doing, but this is the handle. And since I've gotten a little more confident, I put my own name online and stuff like that. Your handle at the coolest cool is pretty damn cool, but I'm curious where that came from.
It ties back to hip hop. There's a track from Lupe Fiasco called The Cool. And in that song, he talks about essentially the struggles of going through the identity crisis of trying to be too cool and playing it cool and focusing so much on being cool that you never actually do what you want to do. And I think, like, for the first probably 16 years of my life, I was very much in that state where I tried to be cool over and over again instead of just being myself. And that held me back, I'd say, in some ways, because like I always loved tech, I always loved innovation, I always loved like games and like that whole world, but I didn't show it. I just like stayed in my lane, focused on the usual things. But then in high school, I switched it up and I was like, I'm just going to do the things that I'm actually interested in, and let's see how the world responds to it. And the world responded very positively, right? So I set up the handle as a reminder to myself, when I go on social, I don't want to start to fall into that trap. I don't want to fall into the trap of trying to be cool. I want to remember to be myself. And the best way to be cool online is to just be myself. And I'm going to talk about things that I'm interested in. I'm going to share things that I'm doing that I find interesting. And if people like it along the way, then they'll follow the journey. But if they don't, then cool. There's more other accounts for them to follow. So it was a reminder for me to go into every action that I took online with pure intention around just like living in my own interests and passions.
It's interesting that you said that ties back to Lupe Fiasco, because I jotted down earlier, listen to some Lupe Fiasco, because that's one that kind of escaped me. You know, we all have our artists that we listen to a ton, and that's one that I was like, that's interesting, because I never would have given him that respect in terms of like the lyricism, I guess, and the writing. So
Lupe is unreal. Check it out, and then let me know what you think of some of the early stuff. Lupe was a beast.
I will, and I'm going to write about it, of course, because that's what we do, right?
That's it, 100%.
And I'm looking forward to that. So that's cool that loops back to that because that's probably why I wouldn't have guessed, because I know a lot of hip hop lyrics. But yeah, that's just one artist that kind of escaped me in terms of going deep into their work. But one who I do really know a lot about, and one of my favorite albums, like front to back. And what I mean by that is like when they just tie together so beautifully, you know, it's like a piece of art that you should just sit and listen to for 90 minutes if you can,
Yeah.
is Evolution by Joyner Lucas.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure it's the first skit where he is basically in the first grade and his teacher's asking everybody what they want to do. And he's like, I don't want to do any of these jobs when I grow up. I want to own my own thing. I want to be an entrepreneur. And then it goes into the album. And that's such a buzzword. By the time this episode comes out and over the next few years, it's going to be an even bigger buzzword, I think, being an entrepreneur. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, to me, it's becoming more and more of a buzzword. For me, the idea of entrepreneurship is pretty simple. You work for yourself, you run your own business, and you create value for the world, and the world gives you value back in the medium of cash and money. So I got a taste of entrepreneurship at a very young age. My grandfather ran a small paving company where he would go around and literally pave people to driveways. And that gave me a glimpse into what a business could be. Like, still by no means were we like ridiculously wealthy. Like, we would have been considered in the low income category, but my grandfather had his own paving company, and I got a taste of entrepreneurship through that. And I loved the control that he had over his calendar. He was able to pick me up from school. He was able to drive me to any school dance. He was able to show up for any event that we were have in band, whatever it might be, take me to swimming lessons. Like, he was always able to show up. And I was like, how does he do this? But like everybody else is always working. Like, how does he have the ability to do this? And it turned out that it was because he runs his own thing. Like, he gets to dictate his own hours. He got to control when he showed up for things, when he was, what he wanted to do with his time. And it was inspiring to me to see someone with that much control. Just to have that much control over your own life was, like, to me, the ultimate goal. And I can remember at a young age, I never did well with direction. I hated the idea of a school teacher telling me to stand in line. I hated the idea of schools telling me when recess was and lunch. Like, that just like was the worst experience for me. And because I was very much like, let me do my own thing. Like, nobody's going to tell me what to do. So then when I seen his lifestyle, I was like, that he's doing it right. And then I got to a point where I had to like start deeply again. I thought a lot, and I got to this hypothesis on what I wanted to do with my life. And it was essentially whatever I wanted. I came to a conclusion at an early age that if I can wake up, go to bed, and do what I want in between, that I would be successful. And the best way for me to get to that outcome would be entrepreneurship. So for me, entrepreneurship just meant making money online, because that was all I knew at the time outside of paving, and I didn't have money to go buy a paving company. So I was like, I'm going to try this online thing. So I went online and I came across this site called eBay. And it turned out that on eBay, you could sell things. So I happened probably a few months earlier to go to Atlanta on a school trip, and I bought a bunch of clothes. And the clothes were cool. They were nice, but I was like, cool, I spent a bunch of money on these clothes. I wonder if I could sell them on eBay and make more money. So I started to list them on eBay, started to get money through the internet. It's like, this is wild. Like, I'm making money on the internet. So I started to double down on that and just continue to sell things. And for me, entrepreneurship became a light bulb moment as an opportunity. I bought a bunch of durags. I started to sell durags out of my high school locker. I had every color of the rainbow. I made a mint off of that. Then I started to sell jerseys online. I found a wholesaler who was selling jerseys. I set up some opportunities on eBay to be able to sell those. Was able to, again, pay for a good chunk of my tuition on the back of that. I found this digital community online that was focused on 2 video games. One was Madden and one was The Sims. Started to sell like cheat codes and like tricks and guides on how to play those games and how to win, as well as modifications on them. Started to make more money off of that. And then I started rawsimmons.com, which was a website for myself where I was like, again, let's see if I can make money online. And I started to sell books and courses and do blogging. And then I got an email from a company out of Miami. I'm based in Nova Scotia, Canada. So the East Coast of Canada, very small population. And this company was like, Ross, can we fly you down to Miami to train our people on marketing? I was like, what? This makes no sense. I'm like 23, 22 years old. I don't know anything about business outside of like what I've been reading and writing about online. Like I'm not a goat in any ways in this space, but I said, yeah, let's do it. So they fly me out and I do this thing. I'm talking to like their leadership team about how to do marketing to millennials, and they were eating it up. And I was like, this is wild. Like all because I started to create things online. People started to see me as an expert. This is personal branding, right? Like they saw me blog, they saw me write blog posts about marketing to millennials, and they wanted me to go and speak. And that's when the light bulbs went off. Okay, so I can produce things online that show that I know things, and then people will reach out to me and pay me to tell them the things that I know. Let's do it. So I kept doing it. I kept writing. I kept creating content. I kept creating stories. I kept talking about things I was learning in the moment. And eventually, I was able to get some ridiculous opportunities where some of the biggest brands in the world wanted to collaborate with me and wanted to hear me talk about marketing or give them and their marketing teams guidance on how to do things. And then eventually they wanted me to actually do the things that I was telling them to do. And then time got filled up. So I needed to hire other people to help me do it. And it all started with, again, that one insight around my grandfather being able to have complete control over his schedule, and then going down the rabbit hole of entrepreneurship and selling things in a whole bunch of different ways. And now having a company that works with some of the top brands. And in the next few minutes or so, when we're done this, I'll probably hang out with my little ones, have a quick little lunch break with them, maybe go for a walk around the lake, and then potentially come back up and do some more calls. But that's happened over a decade plus of work. But it gives me the luxury and flexibility that I've always wanted.
And that's so cool. And it makes me smile from ear to ear because like, I know for every person who tells that story, there's probably 99 other that tried and didn't quite figure it out yet. Maybe they're still going, maybe they didn't quit. I know I saw a girl yesterday who was designing things and posting them on Instagram for years and years and struggling, and like she had no money left. And then finally this year she started creating swag and merch for the Olympics without asking for anything in return. And all of a sudden every single Olympic country and sponsor and brand picked up her work, started sharing it and asking her to make merch. And now she's just skyrocketed, like, the quote unquote overnight success.
Yeah, success.
And that overnight success is never overnight. That journey that you just shared, I mean, goes back obviously a long time.
Oh, yeah.
And before we get too much into the how to, I'm still curious a little bit. You mentioned your grandfather and the paving company. I have a very similar story. My grandfather owned a steel shop in downtown Detroit. I learned everything I learned about business as a kid, anyways, was from him, because I always tell people that it skipped a generation. Like my parents, if they needed to make money, they were like, oh, where do I put my resume? And that's kind of how I really, I actually, at the time, it was so extreme that I was like, oh, what my grandpa did wasn't like, that was too bad that he had to do that. Like, that was too bad that he had to go make his own business. It's a lot easier because people will do this for you. And that was my early 20s, especially coming out of university. That's what everyone was doing. Polish up your resume so you can go get a job. I know you went to St. Mary's, like you did university. So did you have to deal with that conflict in your own mind, though, about going to get a job versus building a business?
No, because all through university, I had side hustles. I knew at an early on age that I wanted to work for myself. I just needed to figure out how I would get to a point where I could do something full time for myself. So all through university, I was running a lot of those side businesses that I talked about, like selling jerseys, having those websites that I was selling content on, selling mods and things like that. I did have to go through the experience of getting a job, but it was never my end goal to retire employed. My end goal was always to eventually work for myself. So all through university, I did have to like go through the motions of applying for jobs and things like that. I ended up working at a broadcasting company and supported the CBC with like training their entire team on social media and things like that. I quit, started up my own events company, took people skydiving, rock climbing. We did like brewery tours. We did a bunch of wild, crazy adventures and experiences. While doing that, I got a job with another ad agency. I wanted to use the ad agency as experience to learn how to run an agency. So I was there for about a year and a half, and then I quit once I had about 20K worth of net new clients, because I knew They were paying me they were paying me, I think, 37K, maybe less, maybe 32K, 30ish, let's say 35 grand. So they were paying me about 35 grand. I had a couple clients. They were going to pay me about 20 grand for the year to support their marketing and social media efforts. And I was like, look, I was happy when I was broke. If I'm broke and making 20 grand, I can still eat Mr. Noodles and be happy. Like, I'm good with that. So put in my notice, I quit. And I was like, I got to go hard to kind of see if I can get back to that 35. I was able to double that in the first year. Then the year following, I was able to do like 250. And I was like off into the races. And it was like, cool, this thing worked out. But I always had the aspiration of working for myself. The only job that gave me pure joy would have been when I was a camp counselor. Like, outside of entrepreneurship gives me pure joy. But like from a 9 to 5 job, when I was a camp counselor, that was an experience on its own that I loved. I loved working in camps. I worked at the Tim Hortons camp, which was for underprivileged kids. Did that for multiple years instead of taking an internship with like corporate America or Canada, however you want to describe it. I decided I was going to do work at these camps all summer, and I had an absolute blast. And then became an entrepreneur, and I've loved it ever since. So yeah, I always had that aspiration of becoming an entrepreneur.
I always appreciated entrepreneurship and the idea of sort of working for yourself, but I never actually took the steps to like build a side hustle or really do anything with it. I did a lot of things that I think back and I'm like, man, I was so ahead of my time. Like I remember I played university football and our coaches made me stop documenting our season. Like I knew we were going to have a killer season. I was like, this is going to be such good content. That's before any social media platform.
Yeah.
And I was like filming it all, and like it would have been so cool to edit and put together. So it was much more on like the media, maybe even marketing side of things, but without the first step of having something to sell, right? But it was always in the back of my mind.
That's cool.
And it's funny that it's cool that you mentioned camp counseling as something that intrinsically you appreciated, because that was why my version of figuring all of this out was going into teaching, spending like a couple years, because I was like, I can't do this in mainstream education. I love the book, Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Yes, I just literally added that to my cart. I haven't read it yet. Yeah, no spoilers.
Oh, really? Yeah, it's it's the one spoiler I'll say is like it's almost hard to read in terms of like emotionally for me, because I know how many kids kind of tried to go through that system and like ended up homeless or struggling with drug addiction, and like it didn't turn them down a good path. And that's the whole goal of the show, really, is to let's pivot that to a good path instead. Take that energy, the hate on for school, how you don't fit, and realize there's another world out there, another possibility for you. And so for me, I was like, I'm out. But what I found was we have schools here in Ontario, Canada, that when kids are in treatment, so they could be struggling with addiction, they could be teen moms, they could be in jail, psychiatric hospitals, or just illness, homeless, Christless. There's so many different struggles these kids have. Well, they need high school education. And so I've found myself basically being able to teach one-on-one in most cases, or very small groups, and on topics that start with their interests. So the kids always say, and it's kind of sad, they're like, it sucks that I had to get pregnant to end up in the best school in the world, or I can't believe that I had to develop a meth addiction to end up coming to the best school in the world. Like they recognize it after a couple weeks, a month or so. Like, what do you mean? Like, why are you asking me what I'm interested in and stuff like that? And it's hard to watch because you think of that mainstream system. But for me, it's something that was sustainable as far as a job goes, while I still figure out entrepreneurship. Because for me, the reason why when people ask, especially when people ask within the system, is it's not scalable enough. Like the word scalable comes to mind for me because, yeah, I might work with 8 youth in a year. Well, maybe 8,000 could benefit from learning these topics. And so that's my big why in terms of kind of pushing the envelope with this stuff.
I love that.
Thank you. And you when you talk about this stuff, you talk about it like really off the cuff. You know, you mentioned 32K or maybe it was 37K and like some different business ideas. If one of these, someone was they had an opportunity they won lunch to go with you and learn some entrepreneurship, be it a small group, maybe three, or let's say I invited you into a classroom I had with a few youth who were wanting to like, they heard you say on this podcast because the clip went viral on TikTok that you wanted to be able to do whatever you want with your day. Let's use that as the prompt, right? You want to be able to do whatever you want with your day. And they're like, man, that sounds pretty damn cool. But like, to remove the curse of knowledge and break it down for them a little bit, they're like cracking their knuckles. They got their laptop open at night and they're like, okay, what do I do?
I think it starts with experimenting with creating things. Like, you have to be curious. And I know this is going to sound a little bit vague because everybody's interests are different, but you need to be curious and start with understanding the things that you actually can get excited about every day. And then when you think about those things, like for me, it was football. Football really is my sport. I love football. I'm a big Eagles fan. I love Madden. I combine those two things. And I said, I'm going to use my passion for these two things to build skills that I will be able to sell in the future. In the short term, when I'm like 19 or 18, it doesn't really matter. Don't worry so much about like making 300K, 200K. Like, don't worry so much about that. Worry about the skills that you can build to be able to do that in the future. So I said, football is my thing. I need to love it, which I already did. And I need to talk about it and I need to learn about it deeply. So I started to write blog posts about fantasy football every single week. And I gave myself the task that every week I was going to write 3 times because I hated what I had to write about in university. I was like, you want me to write about Macbeth? You want me to write about Shakespeare? Showed it to anybody who's a fan of the like original literature of the world. It just put me to sleep. So I wasn't interested. So I was like, I hate writing about this stuff. I'll write it, get my B's, get my C's, maybe even a D, but I'm going to continue to pass through university. But what I actually like writing about is sports. So I'm going to write about sports in these communities and I'm going to test myself to see, can I become very popular in these communities by adding a bunch of value? So on Mondays, I gave recaps of what happened on Sunday. On Thursdays, I told people, or on Tuesdays, I told people who they need to pick up from the waiver wire. If I'm talking about fantasy football and people don't know what I'm talking about, essentially, I was telling people like, this is who you need to go get because they're going to do good next week. And then I would tell people who they need to start in their lineups. And I was doing this every single week for the whole football season. But I wasn't just putting up like small posts. Like, these were in depth with data, with charts, with graphs. I was geeking out and going into like my circle of genius to create these things. And I pressed publish on them. And 2 things were happening. One, I was learning about the internet and how to distribute content and how to make communities work and how to interact with people, because people would hate on me and I had to respond back, and people would yell at me and I'd have to learn how to respond back. I had to manage all of that. While all that was taking place, I was getting a real MBA on community management, on copywriting, on long form storytelling, on messaging and personal productivity, and like owning your calendar. Because the contract was signed. I told myself the contract was signed. I have to do this every week in this community 3 times a week. The world knew, so I got to do it. So I was building skills without even like actively trying to make money, but skills that I knew could be monetized in the future. So I did all of that through university because I hated writing about Macbeth and Shakespeare, but I wanted to get good at writing because I knew that writing was a part of my path. Like, I'm going to be a marketer. So I just did it. So if you want to be in the video world, what are something that you're passionate about that for the next 3 years, 2 years, you can create video about to like just become excellent at your craft? And then when you are excellent at your craft, then you start to say, how do I monetize this? How do I make money from it? So for me in the writing, I spent all those years just writing about football. And then eventually I got to a point where I was like, all right, I'm going to start writing about marketing, my actual degree, something that I can monetize quickly. So I started to write about it. And I used the same lessons that I learned there, but in marketing. And now, again, I was able to start generating income. Now you might be saying, okay, Ross, but even then, how do you make money off of this stuff? There's a million ways to make money online. You can make money online through things like affiliates, which is essentially the idea that you have a website and you're creating content, and then you talk about other people's products, other people's services, other people's courses. And then if somebody clicks on that link and they go and buy it, you get a kickback from any transaction that takes place. So you're kind of like the middle person. And if you talk about my book and I've given you a link and you get 10 people in your group chat to buy it, guess what? You're going to get a portion of that sale. You can also do that with brands like Amazon, where you can get an affiliate link to any computer program. You can sell this microphone, and that microphone, if somebody buys it through your link, you get a kickback. All of those things are possible. You can also make money by creating actual digital products. So if I'm an expert in fantasy football, I can, at the beginning of the season, create what I call the fantasy football guide and then promote it and sell it for $5 a piece. And if I get thousands of people to buy it, that's 5 times 1,000. It's a decent amount of money off of a ebook that I created. With things like ChatGPT, it's easier than ever to now create these information products and sell them. Lots of opportunities there as well. So, long story, much longer than I thought, because I don't even remember what the question was that you asked, and now I'm here. How do we get to the nitty gritty of it? That's essentially the path, folks. Like, experiment with a ton of things that you're interested in. Look up ways to make money online. You can also go on sites like Fiverr if you feel like you don't really know where to go. There's this, like, Fiverr is a marketplace for business. So you can go there and you can sell services to other people. So let me geek out on this one for a sec, because I think for anybody who's early in their like entrepreneurship journey, this is a go-to spot. Fiverr and Upwork. Why? So on these sites, people go to them like me, and I say, I need someone who can create a logo for me. I need someone who can take this picture that is black and white and turn it into a picture that has color. I need someone who can do a voiceover. I need someone who can train me on how to win at Fortnite, right? Like, you can go onto these sites and literally find people who are making thousands of dollars every month, teaching people how to play Madden, how to play Fortnite, how to play any game that you can think of. And they're selling their time to coach people on this stuff. How to review a resume. Okay, let's say that you have gone through the job market and you already have a job. But let's say you have a kid at home and you're like, I got to put more money on the table. Like, this 9 to 5 thing isn't doing it. You can set up an account on Fiverr or on Upwork, and you can say, I'm a resume reviewer. And then people who are going through their schooling can send you their resume. You can review it and you can get paid for it. These are things that are opportunities right now. And to me, I believe the internet is the greatest equalizer. That's why I'm a big fan of the internet. That's why I love talking on these things, because I was a broke kid in the middle of Nova Scotia with no income, no uncles who could give me a job into corporate America, nobody who could be like, Ross, here's a silver spoon, you made it. And with the internet, I feel like it's impossible to not find an opportunity to make money. It literally doesn't feel like it's possible. There's so many ways. There's no one who is so unskilled that they can't make money on the internet. That's truly my belief. There is someone out there right now. I don't care, again, if you are 16 years old, if you are better than me at, let's say, a video game of some sort, you could be paid to teach other people how to play that video game right now. Everybody who's that worse than you, there are people who would be willing to pay you. Might be $5, but they'd be willing to pay you to join your Patreon account, to see you talk about this game that you create. They'd be willing to subscribe to maybe your X account. They might be willing to pay for you for one-on-one coaching. The money opportunities on the internet, folks, is absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely wild. So many opportunities to win. So many opportunities. It doesn't matter where you live, unless you're in a rural community where there's no Wi-Fi, no internet. And in those cases, go to the public library. And again, I can remember early on that having to be me. Went to the library a lot just because I needed access to the internet, because Wi-Fi in Preston, Nova Scotia back in the day was very, very bad. Like, the internet was horrible. So I would go to the public library, I book a room, and I just grind. So that would be my rant. That's my story. If you want to get gritty with it, like, there's so many ways to win, folks. Find me on all the platforms. If you have questions on how to make money on this stuff, like, I will give you some tips, give you some ideas. I'm happy to give away all that I got for free.
I love it. You're a beautiful person that way. And like, I feel like clapping, because that was like, anytime someone provides a 10-minute answer that could be in and of itself a full YouTube video that could go viral because it really helps people, I know that there's a big impact there. The thing that happens with long answers, though, on the other side, is it's like, man, I got 17 follow-up questions.
Yeah. I'll keep my responses are going to be shorter. My responses are going to be shorter. I got you.
Man, the best thing about podcasting is that we get to just, it's almost like being a painter, you know, you get to go with your gut, short or long, doesn't matter. And it's just awesome. I interviewed Tim Stodds of Copy Blogger recently, and he's also a Philadelphia Eagles fan. That's what the connection was. It made me think of that. Something I couldn't really ask him about, though, was uh, building a business in Canada. And when people say to me, oh, like, how do you succeed building a business in Canada? Because maybe they're in Texas or something and the taxes are different. Like, they always like pass judgment that it must be so hard. Like, why don't you move to Bali or something? I'm curious. Like, you stayed at home and you are building a successful business. But as someone who hasn't yet built an empire like you have, I don't really know why people ask that, what they mean. Like, for other kids maybe in Canada who are thinking about business, but they're like, oh, I have to move. What is your thoughts on that?
It's a question that you will get a lot in your career as a Canadian entrepreneur. And I think the reason why people ask is because in Canada we have higher taxes. It's pretty cut and dry. But you don't really need to worry about the taxes unless you're really, really crushing it. Like, at the end of the day, the taxes and the issues that come with it are a first world, it's a champagne problem. It's a champagne problem when you have to worry about whether or not you should move to Bali because your taxes are so high. If you're in the grit, in the dirt, who cares? Like, it is not, there's no more difficulty than being in Texas, being in Philly, being in New York. It's all the same. The only difference is, like, you might need to travel and jump on a plane here and there, which gives it a bit more challenges. But for the most part, if you're doing the digital thing and the internet thing, there's no borders to make money. You just go, just make your money, secure the bag. Like, before you make 37K, you don't really even need to worry about anything. So just go make that amount of money. Once that's been done, you do have to take into consideration getting registered, incorporated taxes and all of that. That stuff all starts to become more and more real, but it's still a minuscule amount for you to be that caught up in. Once you surpass, let's say 150, then you start having champagne problems. When you're over 150 grand a year, you're making enough money to start looking at your check and being like, okay, if I lived in Texas, I might make an extra 30K. I might make an extra 20K just from a tax standpoint alone. And that is a good problem to have. Well done. Congratulations. You did it. You made it to the 1% of, like, the point where you should be. So you want to be there. Good. Go chase it and pursue it. And now that you've done that, you can make the call, right? But at that point, until you're there, don't worry about it. Just go be persistent in making your money, changing your life, changing your trajectory. And until that moment, ignore it. Don't worry about it. But once you hit that, then you can have those questions, but it's a champagne problem. So congrats, go figure it out. Personally, I decided to stick around because I have family here, and I do lose a lot of net possible revenue because I'm here, but I love the country. I think I get to live a pretty solid lifestyle with my family and my kids. Cost of living feels good. The winters are killing me, not gonna lie. But for now, I'm still here. We'll see long term if that continues. I think there's a bigger kind of question around whether or not taxes are going to continue to hurt the long term goals of the legacy. But in the short term, life's good.
Yeah, the winter is an interesting thing, you know. Like, I know the author of the Entrepreneur Fast Lane talked about when he moved from Chicago to Miami, like it was a game changer. And for me, I'm here for family for sure, pretty well till the end. However, I wouldn't mind a few warmer vacations, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%.
But I'm with you on that. When you mentioned going to the library, getting those books and like buckling down, and you said the term grinding. Now, I know that another brand that you have is Hustle and Grind, which is, you know, e-commerce, hoodies, mugs, art, that kind of stuff that people can purchase. Probably a Shopify store, I would guess, like that kind of vibe. And you also have the B2B marketing company. When people are starting out, there's, again, it's one of these things that's kind of like it's almost like a buzzword, except for like, it's like a buzz debate, I guess, you know, the idea of B2B versus B2C. And just because you have expertise in both areas, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it needs to line up with your interests and what you get excited about. Like, I know it's difficult for a lot of people to get excited about working with other businesses. Like, hey, I'm working with a manufacturing company. I'm working with a company that specializes in waste management. Let put me to sleep, right? Like a lot of people would go to sleep talking about that. If that's you, don't do it. Go down a different path. Start thinking about opportunities that are B2C. Oh, you get excited about the idea of selling coffee or creating a clothing brand or doing illustration for other people or doing painting or whatever it might be. Pursue that, right? Like I think it's important to pursue the things that can get you excited every day, to learn and to like build your craft. Both have their rewards, both have their benefits. I love in B2B how close you get to the money, in the sense that like I can work with a contract and on a deal that's like 55K, and it's like, all right, that's a big amount of money and it's one transaction, versus in B2C, I might need to sell 55,000 times to make $55,000. Like different scales. So I think it all comes down to you as an individual, what you get excited about, and then pursue that. If you're just excited about money, then I think B2B is probably a great place to go. It's a faster path because you can get into sales. And if you're in sales, then you can just sell things all the time.
Yeah, B2B is another thing that's kind of like, unless you went to business school, is sort of behind the curtain a little bit. Whereas B2C, you can kind of see, right? Like, oh, I'm going to create these new Strider bikes and kids can see them. And I know a Strider bike's $99. Well, I'm going to make mine 79 and it's better
Yeah,
and they come in cooler colors.
True. Good point.
So when it comes to B2B, you just mentioned, oh, you can have a 55K contract and it's like a one-off solution that you can see. What is an example of something that you would sell, like you have to deliver on to create something that someone buys for 55K?
For 55K, let's say that you are a website designer and a developer of some sort. You can do both. You go to a company and you're like, all right, I see your website. This thing should be making you money. What I want to do is I want to redesign your entire website. Today you have, let's say, 15 pages. We're going to redesign 15 pages. Each of those pages is going to be redesigned for $1,000 a piece. I'm also going to do the development for them. That's also included in the $1,000 a piece. But we also need to add these other 15 pages. We also need to update your website to include a bunch of emails that people are going to get after they subscribe for your newsletter or your promos, whatever that might be. So I'm going to take care of all of that for you, as well as, in addition to that, for a month over month cost, I'm going to make sure that your website is optimized for search and maybe for conversion. And then you bring that to someone and they say, perfect, great, we're going to do that. 55K, let's lock it in. It's an annual contract of some sort, invoiced every quarter, bada boom, bada bing. That's the scope. So those types of service offerings where you're taking a big chunk of a project and laying it out for a client, and maybe even starting it with like a bit of a consulting time where you're just like learning about their brand to make sure your story's right, and then you offer that to them. That's where you can get like a 55K contract just to support them in developing a website.
Boom.
And that price point, this is where it gets really interesting and it's not talked about often, is actually ridiculously low in comparison to some prices I see. Like I know a company that just did a website redesign and it was like 600K. Like there's people who are organizations spending millions of dollars to change their websites. And I didn't see that until I got into the agency land. When I first got into an agency and I started to see that they were running a website contract for like 450 grand, my mind was blown. I was like, you know how many cars I could buy with 450 grand? Like, this is crazy. What are you all talking about? And we were getting strategy projects and people were like, oh, for 40 grand, we're going to do this digital marketing strategy for you. I was like, 40 grand, that's my salary. We're going to do this in 2 months. Huh? What? What are we talking about? Like this, the numbers just didn't, and still today, it doesn't always compute for me because I'm like, okay, I could buy a Honda Civic. This project is a Honda Civic. This makes no sense to me. This is a Porsche. Y'all are going to pay a Porsche for this? And it's just like, it's wild to me. But I encourage people to, if you have the interest in B2B, to consider it. It was one of the, and is still for me, one of the like most mind-bending experiences to see the value that corporations and organizations place on things that young me would have been like, are y'all serious? This is crazy.
Well, I'm not young you in terms of age, but I'm smirking because I'm much later to the game in terms of learning those kinds of things. And I actually shared this with Tim Stodds as well last week, because I told him that uh, actually somebody else who's coming on the podcast, his brand is the Entrepreneur. And he talks about the idea of like only like the coaches coaching coaches to coach coaches and only building a business around that. And there's this whole other debate that we could get into there.
And that's what this person does. They're a coach for coaches.
No, he's not. He just doesn't like that. He doesn't like sort of like some of the Tony Robbins stuff and some of the Dean Graziosi stuff. And like, so he'll profile some of the kind of like scammy people. But
oh, interesting. Cool.
That's, a debate for another day, perhaps. I guess we don't really have enough time to go down that rabbit hole, but it's an interesting angle where he kind of, talks about the fact that like to coach people on building business, you should probably build a business.
Have a business, right?
And Tim actually was the one that brought that up. And I said, well, it's interesting you say that because I personally, right now, I'm opening up about the fact that I sometimes feel like a fraud because I have the podcast, I interview experts, and I'm kind of like a funnel or like a conduit, hopefully, to like ask people like you, because I can't ask every type of, I can't be every type of expert. So if a kid wants to become a musician, I got to interview a musician and let them learn from them. Someone wants to build an agency, I got to interview you and learn from them. I said, but I do want to have some firsthand experience before I go explicitly do something. Like one of my things that I know Gina Bianchini from Money Networks would love if I started yesterday, but is create like a community around this, right? So you've got people listening to the show, you want to help them, we'll create a community where they can all build their first businesses and support each other. So that's kind of like where I'm headed. And I said, well, I feel like first I want to actually know what the heck I'm talking about, that or partner with someone who does. And so I've really started looking more into the B2B world, and particularly in ghostwriting. And that whole idea of like price points and numbers and stuff like that was just fascinating to me, but it has really started to make a lot more sense. Like it makes sense that if a company raises a bunch of money and they have to spend X number of dollars on marketing or something, and they're not going to do it in-house, that like the contracts could be a lot higher. But anyways, I was just smirking because like this stuff that you're talking about when you had your mind blown is like what I'm going through like 5 days ago. Yeah. So, in terms of, we always get to the point where we drop the mic and I ask some theme questions. Before I do, I'll just rattle off a few of the things that I had jotted down because we never, really get to everything. It's impossible on this show. We can choose one topic. We could have done hip hop for 60 minutes, but I jotted down like starting side hustles, podcasting yourself. Side note, I think you have one of the best intro jingles ever. I love it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's so good. And then creating content and distributing forever is something that we didn't even get to yet somehow, but people can certainly read your book, social media tips, and being multi-passionate, but being able to focus, like the balance of that. So anyways, I rattle off all those topics because they're things that I had researched to chat about. So before we do the theme rapid fires, is there anything that you would hate to like, drop the mic right now and not mention?
Yeah, I think you covered it all. I think the biggest piece of advice for folks who are kind of figuring out the journey is really to lean back into that idea that we talked about earlier around being the CEO of you and having that courage to do things that might be necessarily unpopular, and just pursue that idea of having the courage to be disliked. I think if you can do that, you're going to be 10 steps ahead of where you are today. But yeah, let's jump into it.
All right. What's one thing that you yourself are learning right now?
I'm learning how to be a very, very, very active, present, mindful dad. I love being a dad. I've got 3 little ones, and every day I'm pushing myself to be the best version of a dad I can be.
Yeah, that as a fellow girl dad, that means a lot because it's what will matter in the end for sure. One piece of advice for the next generation, when you have the kids, that makes it a lot easier probably to think about.
Yeah, I would say never stop tinkering. That would be my biggest piece of advice. Like find joy in the play, find joy in experimenting, and tinker all the time.
I've got a bonus one I've never asked anyone else, but what was the WWE superstar that you wanted to be when you were a kid?
1, 2, 3 kid. I wanted to be the 1, 2, 3 kid. He eventually turned into X-Pac, but at the time, 1, 2, 3 kid was like the young hip kid who I wanted to be when I grew up.
That's good. And if you were to take the mic, fellow podcaster, you're interviewing me on these topics or otherwise, what's a question that comes to mind?
I would say one of the questions that comes to mind would be, you take your last breath and you look back at your life. What would be the phrase that you described that life with?
Man, I always tell people write your epitaph as like an exercise as often as you can.
I like that.
And then
I like
questions like this can still stump me sometimes because, you know, it feels so final.
Right.
It would hopefully be written by somebody else and just that he helped me live.
That's cool.
I think if I summarized it in a really short phrase, you know, like I was going to go with the buzzword of just keep learning.
Right.
But that's a little bit different, right? Like I think the reason to do that for me is to help other people live, to pursue their purpose, to do a lot of the things that I know you show up serving. Yeah, he helped me live. That'd be good. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. But the last question I always have to ask, because I want people to go support your work, is why and where they can go find your work.
Yeah, go to rawsimmonds.com. That's the best place to go. You can also find me on every other social media platform and channel. Just do a quick search for my name, Ross Simmonds, with a D at the end of Simmonds. Look me up. I'd be happy to connect.
I love the short form videos you're creating.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Keep those going for sure, because I'm sure they're really serving people a lot. Appreciate you so much. I know that it's time to go be a present dad. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you. Appreciate all you do for the community.
Thanks.